Breaking news, Troy Taylor fired from the Stanford Cardinal head coach. He's out today, and no one really expected this firing. Andrew Luck, the new GM, as most of y'all know, former Stanford quarterback. Colts great, retires early, takes some time away from football, and now he's back in at the GM. I'm Nathan Johnston, here with my co-host, Brad Hopkins. It's time to break the huddle. Brad, when we were getting ready to film today, this was not something that was on our bingo card, so to speak. No one has saw this coming. We thought, hey, coaching carousel done for the year. Yeah. Now we're just going to report who the new hires are. But here we stand on a given Tuesday, coming up on spring practice, spring training, whatever you want to call it. Spring games coming up, Stanford in a debacle. Initial thoughts on this, and where does Stanford go from here?
Yeah, so there's obviously, me and you have talked about this off camera. There's a lot of layers to this. There's the layer of Stanford's a week away from starting spring practice, and now they're going, through a change in leadership. There's the layer that, Troy Taylor seems like, he was disrespectful to some staff members, which, that's, I get it's a high pressure job. There's zero tolerance for that.
Sure.
Interesting to me. I mean, you were talking about this, in leading up to this, but Stanford's without an athletic director right now. So in a very interesting move, and we've kind of talked about GMs are becoming more of a regular in college football, but it's different than the NFL and professional sports that it seems like the head coach is kind of over the GM. But for all accounts and from, reading different things, Andrew Luck was over, Troy Taylor in the football program, and he had the power to get rid of him. So that's a layer. So a lot to break down. And Nate, I think an interesting thing is Stanford's not the easiest place to win. We saw that Jim Harbaugh obviously had luck there. We saw that David Shaw had some luck there. But the game's changed. Obviously with NIL, with the transfer portal, Stanford is a very, very high academic institution. So, they're kind of limited in who they can recruit. So it's going to be interesting to see where Stanford goes. And just my final take before, turn it back over to you for your thoughts. Been reading some articles, you were talking about it. A couple names been mentioned. Very, very interesting. Cliff Kingsbury is one name that's mentioned. I don't think he'll go there, but that's an interesting one. Another one that I really, really like, and I'm interested to see if Andrew Luck does this. And before I put this name out there, it does sound like there's going to be an interim for 2025, and this search is going to heat up, and a decision will probably be made in November, December. But Chris Peterson, former Boise State and former Washington head coach, that to me would be a home run hire. That to me would be my 1A, 1B, 1C, 2A. I would go him. He's a program builder. He's a West Coast guy. So, yeah, Stanford in an interesting position, and I'm interested to see what the coming days and weeks look like for this football program.
Well, the biggest thing for me, Brad, for one, and to piggyback off of what you just said, they don't have an athletic director, which means they don't have that mediator right in the middle right now. There's a lot of chaos at Stanford. They have no athletic director. They're in my opinion, the wrong conference. They're in the ACC. They're in a position right now where I think when it comes to hiring, they're going to have to go out and get an alumni. They're going to have to get a former player, former coach. It's going to take a lot for someone to go there. Yeah. You mentioned that the academic prestige, very prestigious program, but we've seen this team succeed in past years. So they're capable of doing it. The question is, can they get back to it? I don't know if they can. Yeah. I don't think Cliff Kingsbury is going to give up a great situation in Washington right now with a young quarterback in the NFL with the Commanders, Jaden Daniels. I think he'd be really stupid to take that job. You mentioned a guy like Peterson. I think he'd be a great fit. I think he knows the West Coast very, very well. Outside of that, we really don't know much. They're all allegations right now, allegedly. Speaking, obviously, it was enough to fire him.
Right.
But we don't know what the future holds for Stanford. I think that plays into it as well, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, just over a disagreement or needing a reset at a program, in my opinion, is not feasible to fire someone. You better make sure that when you do fire that person, it is for the right reasons, because any coaching candidate coming in after that is going to have some serious reservations and serious questions coming in to that interview process.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I mean, Stanford, being in the state of California, they're in a good spot recruiting wise, but like you said, I think with the way obviously NIL in the portal is, Stanford's one of these teams that, and I put Vandy and I put, to an extent, Georgia Tech in the same box. They got to,
Notre Dame,
they got to maybe, think outside the box a little bit. But, I think you hit on a good point. Stanford is not known as that, traditional football powerhouse. Like I said, they've had some good success. I mean, but it's been a few years. I mean, honestly, David Shaw's last few years there, he wasn't great. Troy Taylor was slowly, I think, had a good thing going. But yeah, it's an interesting position. And, the names that I saw in an article, I didn't think a lot of them were feasible. And that's just one article. Like I said, we're, 3 or 4 hours into this news, we're going to see a lot more coming out. But I think what's important for Andrew Luck now is he needs to get, an interim in place as quick as possible and then start trying to hold this roster together to get ready for spring practice. It's going to be critical.
Yeah, one more point before we close out on this topic. We mentioned the academic prestige. We mentioned the culture. We mentioned the West Coast vibe, so to speak. They're going to have to find a guy that fits all of that.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a university that can bring in talent. We've seen McCaffrey. We've seen the current GM and Andrew Luck play there. Hogan was a great quarterback, throwing hoagie sandwiches down the field, as I like to say. I don't know where they go from here. It's a tough situation. Even SMU being in the ACC was weird, in my opinion. Cal, obviously, being in the ACC too. I don't know where they go from here. I'm puzzled. Honestly.
Yeah, and you mentioned SMU and Cal, which that's two comparisons. Cal in a tough spot. SMU has got a lot of NIL backing, so I think they're in a better position. But yeah, Stanford's definitely. I think they're gonna have to get creative. And look, I was really intrigued by Andrew Luck coming to be a GM there. He's a young guy. He obviously loves that program enough to, he's been away from football obviously a couple years, but to kind of go back into the football environment, he's this is a big first hire for him, assuming that he's going to do it. Look, I think it's still interesting. I did not know this when the news came out. Stanford's without an athletic director, so is that the first piece, and then they look for a head coach? Which, I would imagine that's going to kind of be the thing, but. There's a lot of layers. This is not going to be the last time this offseason that we talk about this.
Final 2 questions from my end, Brad, and this can be both for you and the viewers. Number 1, do we eventually see Andrew Luck taking a coaching spot at Stanford? He's still young, has a lot of talent, has a bright mind for the game of football. You got to think if the new athletic director comes in, he aligns with everything you need in a coach. Does he step down from GM, step up as a head coach?
I'm going to say no, and I like Andrew Luck, but it's a lot different being a player than a coach. I think he needs to recognize, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say no, he's not going to be the coach. I think he's going to say there's guys that have got a lot of experience that are successful winners that I can turn this program over, that I played for, that I sweated for, that I bled for, that I cried for the good of Stanford Cardinal football. I'm going to turn this over to someone that's a winner that knows how to run a program. So I don't think he's going to be the coach. In my opinion, I think he's going to stay GM.
If he stays GM, my follow-up question would be, is there a chance that Stanford tries to move into a different conference moving forward?
Honestly, don't think. I don't know, but for the foreseeable future, and I'm going to say foreseeable future is at least 5 years, I think they're stuck. Look, I will say, it's still weird. It's weird thinking about, you've got, Clemson, Virginia, Florida State, Miami, traveling out to Palo Alto to play games. It's weird, but I think Stanford's out there. Look, I don't want to get into conference alignment. This is not the talk, but it made more sense to me and for Cal to go to the Big 12. That didn't happen, but I think Stanford is stuck in the ACC right now. Yeah.
And I think they're stuck in general. I think this is a really sticky situation for them. I really do. I know you and I talked off air. We're shocked by this firing. And granted, and we weren't expecting Stanford to be in the playoff picture this year or next year, maybe even 3 years down the line. But again, when you think of Stanford, you think of the academic prestige, you think of a very outstanding, very well-respected university in its own right. Now they find themselves in the crosshairs heading into a season where there's a lot of unknowns.
Yeah.
Now they just added to their plate. Going to be interesting to see what Andrew Luck can do as the GM. He's got a tough task ahead of him, both hiring the head coach and figuring out what's going to happen with the next recruiting class, transfer portal, et cetera, NIL, all that good stuff. Going to be intriguing to see. If you're a Stanford fan or just a college football fan in general, want to give a take on this situation, let us know down in the comments what you think about this firing of Troy Taylor. And can Stanford turn it around and become a top competitor in the ACC? We'll see you next week. Be sure to subscribe. Be sure to like this video and turn on those bell notifications so you can keep up to date when we post our latest content. We'll see you next week. It's time to break the huddle.